Hello, my name's Tony, and I've made this recording in case everything goes wrong on Wednesday. It'll be my first Zoom, and I know you've probably all zoomed out, but I hope I've got something that's of interest for you. So, basically, what has happened is that I've been asked to give a talk on MID, which is minimal invasive dentistry. And in the past, this was given by someone else, and his name's Kirk. And what I did was I ended up contacting Kirk by a method I'll explain later. But basically, this is Kirk. You can see I'm there as well. I wouldn't look at that. But I was interested in prevention, and I'm sure I'll talk about that. And he has done a talk on minimal invasive dentistry over a few years to a large number of people. And so when I contacted him, I said, I'll put all your details on a web page. And so I made this web page over the weekend, and it's got all the things that you would want to know about, and it's a great resource. So I would use that. So I'm definitely no expert on MID, but then I don't think many people are experts in everything. So I'm not going to get beat myself up about it. So I made this page, and then as always, I added a little bit more. So I put I made a blog page. I've never done a blog page. I'm still not quite sure how they work because no one looks at them. But I've also made videos myself, and I'm hoping that the videos are better than this one, but they gradually improve. And so different subjects are within the blog. So we will talk about this bioactive glass ionomer, isn't it? Sorry, bioactive glass toothpaste, and there's some really good references there within this web page. Um, there's also some on an app. Well, I'm definitely going to talk about that. Right. So everything that you want is on the MID will be there. All the references as well. So within the reference section, um, the vast majority of this by Kirk. Although I have spoken to this chap a couple of times, um, and Kirk's presentation is here. So what would be really useful for you and your trainer is if on one day when you actually haven't got a huge amount to discuss, you could always actually go through the file a little bit like I have. What I did do is I added some links to it, and this part here is actually what the CDO sent to us and keeps updating, and it is, it actually is, it does read well. It just doesn't really connect to what has been going on in the past in the health service. And if that was a way forward, then fantastic. But my experience, unfortunately, is it probably won't, but it doesn't mean we can't try. Um, Ethics, this is kind of, it's more sort of, I suppose, slightly political. There are some things that I've done talking about how, unfortunately, we don't seem to have progressed a great deal. A lot of dentists my age are retiring, and well, if we could, we'd just be playing golf. In fact, so will I. But if you have a little read about this, it explains how actually, if we all worked as a huge team, then we'd get a lot further. And you just starting out in your career, you ought to try and involve yourself, or certainly get organized. And that's what I've been trying to do, is to make life easier for you. um, I started to add some videos on here, but I think that'll change. And so just have a little look. So it's talking about restorative techniques. You find out my spelling's not great. I reckon I'm dyslexic, or just a lazy speller. But there's an awful lot of errors here. I can't remember what I put in oral surgery, but this I just added, and I just added a bit just now, which hopefully will have this in. So on the study day, then it's going to be dull. 3 hours of me talking is going to drive you nuts. But what I've done is I've made a few videos for different groups of you to look at, and they're just relatively short. This one's interesting. It's a recent one. This person here is excellent. I've emailed them a couple of times, and you kind of ask permission to do stuff, but they're excellent. Some aren't so good. This one's a good one, obviously by the company. And the idea is just to look at them. This one isn't particularly great. they're all a minute, and they're done by the ADA, American Dental Association. But it just gives you a variation, and then I just want you to judge them. And then you do a survey, and hopefully I'll get the survey sort of when we have a longer break, and I can have a little look at how you've done it, and we can talk through that. Oh yeah, I'll ask you to download my app. And then there are other section here. This is basically, if you press on play, it will show some slides within the app. And then the next part, I wanted to get a bit of feedback. I think I've written the survey for that. And to contact me directly, then there's an email here. And ideally, I'd like to talk to you again about something other than MID. And this is what it will be, is I think that there's an awful lot more that we could do, but not as an individual. As a group, it could make our lives so much easier. So anyway, that's kind of like an introduction there. And so that's the web page to look for. And yeah, everyone records things differently. I've always screenshotted now when I look at webinars. I just screenshot them and it gives me a reminder. You might want to take a picture with your phone, but something like that. Anyway, let's see if this is recorded, and then I'll do another bit. Okay, so minimal invasive dentistry. This is where I'd say pause the screen now and read this. And then what I did was I just duplicated it and just underlined the bits that are of interest. This is from 2004. And what it talks about actually is slightly wider than Kirk's talk, in that often we come across people who've already had restorations. And so we can still work in a minimally invasive way there. And back in 2004, it says, oh, this is what we should be doing now. And that hasn't happened. And the other part about it is that we're well aware is that people, while we know prevention works, people won't pay for it. And in lots of ways, the whole way that we deliver dentistry is geared towards payment for treatment. And that isn't in everyone's interests, especially the patient. But it's changing. So this chap, I really like this chap. So lots of the stuff that I learn is, or maybe not learn, but get acquainted with, is through podcasts. Get some of this guy's podcasts. He died 15 years ago. Look up his brainy quotes. They're just, if you're a bit low, they're quite inspiring, really. Mr. Covey, that was an old book, but MID, a win-win. It can win for you and win for the patient. And all this, I actually probably have to change this because I don't know how long my talk's going to go, but hopefully not too long. So this is slightly different again, is how can we make it pay? And I put that in to make it more interesting for you. So there's a video showing you how to do this, but I'm not telling you which one it is. So hopefully that'll keep you engaged. But you certainly can earn money, and both you and your patient benefit. And there are lots of these podcasts now. So this chap, he's extremely good. I've spoken to him a few times. Don't know this chap, but he's explaining in like 20 seconds all about this. And this isn't quite there, but the idea is sound, right? And yes, so this was just me saying the same thing, is that the government actually, in their document, say that that's the kind of saving we get when we use prevention, which isn't quite the same thing. And so I made a video on it, and I've added it to my app. I've already said I'll tell you about my app. But £1 spent for children saves £26 in the long run, and yet we're still not doing prevention. The person I spoke to about the sound tooth guarantee, the name's changed, and quite frankly, I don't think he'll be able to come through with it. He's just like me, he's a one-man band. But what he said over the phone was this, and he worked with a company with expats out in Japan. And basically, when they started making sure people come to have their teeth checked, they actually had less treatment. And he sent me some details on that. And then I changed it into a graph. But what happened was before people didn't go and have the checkups, they just come in, and when they had a problem, if people came in regularly, that's how much they have for a problem. They had the problems just went down a huge amount. So there is a way of making prevention and MID pay. And yeah, you look back, and one thing is I did do a course on, well, I did an extra diploma, so it was on children's dentistry, business, and orthodontics. And you one of the things about business is you have to have the ability to change, and you'll find my viewpoint changes totally in my career. So I went to this inaugural meeting in 1986. I'm sure I did, in Bath, and I said it would never it would never work, and it probably did. It didn't, I don't think, where initially, but I think it does. It does now. And also the practice I was in probably couldn't have afforded it, which is a huge generalization. About 10 years later, I saw this Australian guy talking about prevention and saying how he worked 3 days a week and employed 3 or 4 hygienists, and he was just happy go Larry. He just was saying this is the way forward, and I didn't believe him. And then something happened to me 10 years later, and then yeah, I think the way that we delivered dentistry has to change. This is also to point out that actually I hope I don't come over as just a dental bore, which is what my wife says I am. But we have had a good life. And the one thing that I want to say to you is you will have a great time, whatever the future holds. It's been a fantastic career, and I'm sure it will be for you. It's just, you just got to be enthused about it. And sometimes that can be difficult. So yeah, the reason I showed the picture is this is Tokyo. And well, I went to Japan via Australia, and I'd never been to Australia till about 5 years ago. But on the flight, I read this book. So this is unusual. This is the audio book, and as you can see, it's quite a long one, and it's a really thick book. But in it, it explains how he started his app stores, and I think dentistry will go down that route if we think different, as he would say. And so I did throw in some holiday snaps to make it interesting. This was me as a student. I managed to get over to the States. I sold my car back in the UK, and it wasn't a very good car anyway. And I didn't have any money, so I delivered cars with my friend, and we had to sleep in this every other night. But we drove right across the States from Lexington to San Francisco, and this is the Grand Canyon. And I'll mention these in the talk, but I'm certainly not going to say that now. Right. So these, yeah. So there's Peter Drucker quotes, and so that I think I put this in because one is that a lot of the time we just need to reassure people, and I think that's one thing is that we don't do enough, and certainly we want to be careful here. Is if you're going to do something, you want to make sure that you don't leave them worse off. And this quote here, I think you'll see that again. The best way to predict your future is to create it. And I'm a great believer in that. And yeah, I'm still going on. You still haven't had any MID, but you will see some really poor photos. And I have actually done this course. I think I did it twice. But this is the one online course that you can do for free on Future Learn. And so for all of you, taking photos is the thing. So you need to be doing that. Although this one is on SLR, and you need to get yourself a camera, in my view, an intraoral camera. And so I've done lots of these. That's that one. Obviously, there's a few on dementia, which might become obvious. Hopefully not with me just yet. Digital marketing. And this one, I did a talk on this one once, and that was really, it was a great talk, if I say so myself. It was just because the endodontist broke his arm playing football, which is a good way to break your arm. Yeah, so I've done quite a few of these courses, and they're just an easy way to learn stuff outside dentistry. Right, so as I said, my photos aren't great, and I never anticipated doing this talk. I always wanted to talk about something else if I was able to talk. But this, so this is the common thing: is what do we do here? Should we treat them or not? And all I'm trying to say here, if they're aged 8, I'd probably do something. If you suddenly get someone come in who's 38, well, you wouldn't do that in a, it's clearly been there for over 20 years. So this was quite a new thing for us, is that I think I got my loops about 8 years ago, and suddenly I could see all kinds of things. And I started to see cavities where I'd never seen them before. And also I'd never treated them before. And you got to thinking that, you want to be careful that you don't just pile in and do too much. This chap, I think you might see some of his work, and he doesn't wear them. And his dentistry is phenomenal. And that's despite having been taught, well, not taught, mentored by me. And yeah, so I started back in the 80s, and this would have been, these were the x-rays that we'd have back then. And it has changed, fortunately. So yeah, when these mounts come in, I thought, fantastic, I'm able to look at the x-rays on a mount and I can compare them. I thought, well, that's fantastic. And then of course we've gone digital. And so this has been a great help, is having the screen over the patient. And so as an educational tool, I think it's, they're great. So this is what it looks like. This is, this is my desktop. It's slightly different. But you can see that you all will have played around with the different settings on here, and you can show things and play around with the image. And they're really useful. I don't think I'll mention this, clearly because it's not great. But I do think that is a sandwich, an attempt at a sandwich filling, whereby if anything goes subgingival, I've always put glass ionomer in, unless I put something like this in, which is called a CEREC. And there's another thing I really like, and these are Acides bridges, or Maryland bridges, as I've always called them. And what you can do, you can see that doesn't look perfect, for instance, and that certainly doesn't look perfect. But you don't actually have to do anything. You can keep an eye on them for a few years, and often nothing really happens. And this was just a comparison between what it's like on a screen and what it was like. And often when we used to develop these, they were hand developed, and after a while they just deteriorate rapidly. So let's just play around with the screen a bit more. Yeah, so, and the other thing is, going back, is now you'll have these photos. So I've had a variety of cameras. I think I'm going to show you pictures of a couple. And you know, in the same manner that we have x-rays and we can view all the x-rays, what's going on there? But also you have actually photos that, you know, going back, you show the patient and you can check. And so most of you will be taking over from someone else who will have taken x-rays as well, you know, hopefully every few years. And then you can compare before you pile in and start doing some treatment. So yeah, so here we go. So this person I've been seeing for a long, long time. But we only started having digital x-rays around about this period, about 15 years ago. And I've always quite liked my gadgets. And what has happened, sometimes the software changes slightly, so the images aren't as clear as there. And as you're probably aware, these are just, I should have replaced the film by now. Oh, actually, I didn't own the practice, which is probably why I didn't replace the film. And yeah, so this defect here, if you played around with the image, was probably there 12 years ago. And you can just see from the kind of the shape of the filling that it doesn't look like I've done much. I don't think so. Yeah, and the interesting part here is that, yeah, from that stage there, I've done what I used to do, which is put in a big glass ionomer and leave it a little while, and then I do a crown if they had no further symptoms. That's my kind of technique. And this one, I know, I'm pretty sure there was one awful mistake that I made, and I think it was on this patient, and I think this is a white post, and I didn't check my notes, and I think I tried to take out the white post. I couldn't quite work out what was going on there, and I think she's still got something here, but I couldn't get a post in. And here, I think that you can see there's an outline of a buckle filling there, and unusually it's still there 12 years later. These are quite difficult to get to stick. What you should remember is when we did them, back in the day, we do amalgam and we'd remove more of the tooth to hold these in, like that one there probably. And I haven't done one of them in years, but that's how I was taught. And I was also taught this, is that you do the oral hygiene first and then treat the caries. Well, we've never been able to sort out oral hygiene, in my view, particularly well, because we've never been trusted to deliver it. So what was interesting about this was that at a later date, she told me how nervous she was. And the reason she'd come to see me was she'd had these big veneers done for her that she didn't like. And she always says that I would never touch the veneers until oral hygiene was better. And I did all the restorative work at the back where all the decay was. And that's what happened. So I did all that. And I took the old veneers off. And when we come to fit them, she decided she preferred her teeth without the veneers. And so, and this is over 20 years ago. And she's quite happy with her teeth. And I looked a lot better than when I had the veneers on. And the other thing was that she told me about this. Now, she worked in a care home, and a lot of my patients were carers. And I did my first web page, or rather my second web page, was for this. It's been in the news more recently, but I think I did this 5 years ago, was trying to get advice for carers, because they just do not know, and why should they know, and how to look after the people in their care for regards to their oral health. So I made this video, and it initially was for carers, and then I thought, well, there's lots of issues with oral cancer, and the people need to check themselves basically every month. And then I just added these bits on, and that's what I was doing. So going back to MID, which is one here. Yeah, so you use it to check x-rays. Don't pile in and do stuff. The Diagonodent, I think I'll come to, and this is actually one of Kirk's files. So there are some of these. So to be quite frank, this one and this one, I don't know what they are. And there's going to be a lot more stuff that I don't know. But this one I did like, and obviously everyone uses these, but more so photographs now, which weren't available when certainly when I started. So this is a video to explain to everybody that not all not all dental meetings are the same. And that one was in Vegas, so I'll probably play it in its entirety. And more recently, this is from a group in the States, and this is a podcast from some hygienists and therapists, and it's talking about teledentistry as well as mobile dentistry. And yeah, so that's really interesting, the way that they've adapted a lot quicker to teledentistry than we have. And this is just a reference. This reference is talking about light-based tests. Cochrane is, you're probably all familiar with, is a great resource. Very rarely is it conclusive. And I think what it says here is that more research is needed. Well, as if we haven't got enough research. And I think, well, you're always going to find someone who'll present something that they think is the best thing. And I'm guilty of that. But yeah, this chap, I'd look up, it's all evidence-based, and it's a really good site. Yeah, so loops, we've mentioned loops. So to actually check anything, you need really good vision. I've had a couple of intraoral cameras. I had, the first one we had was actually wireless, and it was great at first, but when people all started having their mobile phones, it deteriorated, and so now I have one with a cable. It wasn't this one, it was just, there are a lot of screenshots within this presentation. But yeah, and I put this in to say that when you actually, sometimes when you clean the tooth, you see more, and sometimes you see less. So you obviously, before you make any diagnosis, you've got to have a clean field. And I've had one of these for a long time. I don't use it every time because they're just really messy. But they are very good for polishing and very good when you are actually preparing the tooth for a sealant. So I think I repeated that. Is when I got my loops, I was seeing far too much. Um, and then more recently, yeah, so I bought another camera. Again, this is one of Kirk's slides. It's another way to look at decay. So I'm not quite sure what that one is. But this is the one that I had when I stopped work. And I had an idea. This is a light, so you can use your mobile phone. So these are really, this is very good actually, but it costs about £500. You clip your phone into the back. And I bought it because I had an idea for something else, and then I haven't really used it. And this was the name of this camera, and it was great. The only thing about it was the chap demonstrating it at the dental show was just very slick. I never ever got to be as good as him. Somehow he could take a picture of the full arch of his own mouth, and I never managed it. And yeah, so there are, if you take your own photos, if you've got an old phone, you can actually upload them to the old phone. So there's all these issues about GDPR, and I'm not going to cover them. But if you do get a fancy camera, then you get tax relief on that. Yeah, the GDPR, you have to be careful where you put the images and obviously get permission. So to get permission, it's just, you need to have a form, obviously. And to be frank, a few of these photos that you will see, I don't think I'd be struggling to find the written documentation on all of them. But the main reason for having it, for your point of view, is obviously in case the legal team come chasing you, but also the patients really like it because they think, oh, I've got an expert here. And you say, well, I've got this, I want to show this case to my colleagues. Is that okay? And obviously you don't show a picture of their face, and that, which is quite easy when you're showing pictures of teeth. And so no one, a lot of these photos, I don't even know who they're from myself. But I do know this one. Let's see. So this is a video of the teeth aren't clean, and there's a lot of silver fillings, broken fillings. Yeah, these are definitely my teeth. Yeah, and this was from the camera that I bought. I think there's a picture of it later on, and it was £40, and the pictures are off my iPhone, and that must be about a year ago now. So they will improve a lot. And I think as a diagnostic tool and a useful tool for teledentistry, how much we're paying for electric brushes. This is a Diagnodent. I use this for checking if staining was decay or not. And the research on them is still quite poor. But this one is a little bit like the Wi-Fi. You can get the Diagnodent Wi-Fi, so cordless, but speaking to a technician, they're not as good as the original, which is this obviously wire. And what is really good is that when you use them on a patient, the higher the reading, so it goes up to 100, the higher the noise. And so you go around the teeth and you press it, not press it, but you hold it against the dry tooth, and it'll make a noise. And it gives you a scoring, which seems to be relatively consistent. So I use this a lot. And I used it with ozone, which will come later in my talk. But this is as a way of measuring decay. I used it a lot, and I had a system whereby, or rather because the research was so poor, in the end I made it up myself, is that if it was below 20, I did nothing. If it was 25, I would seal it. I think if it got to 30 and more, I'd still seal it, but I'd consider opening up the fissure. And yeah, I'll probably talk about that later, before I did what I was going to do. Now, you may be all familiar with this, but basically on my records, I'd put a watch. I wouldn't watch that. I'd do something. I'd watch that. I'd watch that. And if you've got your cameras, then that's excellent. It's what better way to check than you've got these intraoral cameras. Right. Again, this is one of Kirk's slides. Yeah, and he was big on these microburrs and aerobrasion And sometimes and I use this a lot, is ultrasonics when more so when I'm removing old fillings as well. And this one I'm not sure about. I was big into ozone, but this is the biggest problem that we have at the moment, I think, is erosion in certain age groups. It just seems to be in the teenagers. I think if you get through the teenage years and you haven't had a filling, and you certainly haven't got erosion, then I think you're more or less in the clear. That obviously there's perio, we'll come to that. But yeah, I don't think I've done an amalgam in a child for a long, long time. And as soon as glass ionomas came out, I used them a lot more because you didn't have to remove as much of the tooth. And also there was this idea of fluoride release. And with children, I always found you had to be relatively quick when you treat them. So I used a lot of triage in the end, and yeah, they lasted better than the Diract that I used to use, but the triage lasted really well. And even if they only lasted a couple of years, or even if they lasted a few months, they lasted until the next checkup and you just top them up. At least you'd hopefully get to the stage that when they'd lose their deciduous tooth without getting an abscess. And ultimately, I think that's the main thing for children, is just to get them through to their adult dentition. And their adult dentition, you'll have sealed them if they've had decay, or you may not now. You may just put fluoride on them, but there are advantages and disadvantages to both. So yeah, this is one of my videos that I took for disclosing, and it's only when you look at them closely you realize that yeah, I think I must have had a go saying that this isn't good. These white lines are decay starting, and you can't get rid of them. Well, this product Icon, which you may have heard of, is meant to get rid of them. And in all fairness, I haven't used it. My therapist used it though, and she swore by it. And one of the other dentists I know says it kind of works 50-50. But Icon is a remineralization. And this is just reference to what I've done in the past. I know these fillings have been there 25 years because I put them there. And so here is, what do you do here? Well, it could be staining. I think it's very unlikely to be decay. And if you removed it, you're going to lose the rest of the tooth. So you obviously look at your bite wings as well. One of the problems with x-rays is they're just not very good at showing up occlusal decay. By the time you notice occlusal decay on a bite wing, it's often nearly exposed when you do the restorations. So it is almost an art. I always say it's an art trying to diagnose caries, and you use all the tools that you have available, and an experience. And that takes a little bit of time. And yeah, so I don't know, this crown's been there for 25 years as well, and it's a bonded crown. And most were bonded because they lasted better. We were never good enough to make porcelain crowns, and also you'd have to remove so much of the tooth. Yeah, and the gap, I always asked how big a gap, because sometimes they weren't perfect. And I remember being told by someone that if you can get your probe in, that was too big a gap. And if you couldn't, then that was fine. And actually now you would seal that if you thought there was a gap there. So that's sometimes what can happen. And we used to use polycarboxylate cement to put them in, and we're told not to use glass ionomer, and because it would dilate, it would leach out. Well, the color of the glass ionomer was a lot better than the polycarboxylate. So if you had a crown that didn't initially, when they didn't fit particularly well, then you'd be more inclined to use glass ionomer, and that's what we use now. So I did do lots of composites, but I've never been brilliant at doing composites, and that's they're not bad. Well, this one's been there 15 years, but one of the reasons is that a practice I was at, the dentist wanted all his silver fillings replaced with white fillings, and this would have been about 1990, I guess. And the material was called occlusin, and I'm pretty sure he used to set it. The first time it came out, it was a dual cure. Anyway, I think this was like cure because when one of the dentists who put the fillings in went on holiday, the other dentist asked me to replace them because he was in so much pain with them. And it wasn't because they had, at the time you have the contraction when the white material sets, but this is because it hadn't set. And so I was always a bit reluctant to do white fillings on posterior teeth because we used to get so much discomfort with them. Oh, and this is another one. I've used triage a lot, and also on adults, and for like what you call a class 5. And it does, you can kind of almost smear it on. So if someone had a lot worse than this, and it was stained and you weren't sure, especially in the elderly, I'd use triage a lot. And this chap, I've done some, and they've been hanging on there and there for 8 years at least. And it was literally a smear of the Fuji triage. This is actually his brother, and I took a photo back then because that's when I had my camera, clearly. And it's not a great photo, but it did heal up. But the interesting part was this, is that, if you look closely, that's delayed healing, and that's delayed healing. And back then, no one knew what it was, so I sent him to the hospital. And it was osteonecrosis. The guy was having chemo, and he was on a lot of bisphosphonates. And at that time, we didn't know. But the photo helped a lot. And sadly, he died. And tooth whitening. I think I've included this as minimal dentistry, in that in the past, what we used to find is that if someone had a crown done after 15, 20 years, the natural teeth darken, and we'd replace the crown with a darker crown. Well, of course, now you'd whiten it, and that's it's very easy to do. I think I've probably made a video. Well, I have made a video on it showing how people can whiten their teeth. I'm not a believer in doing it in one visit. But it's a great marketing tool, and if you're not busy and you want to earn more money, then you do it in one visit. But generally, overnight, over a few months, over a few weeks rather, I think is the best. And so this patient here, again, this is minimal dentistry, when actually for this patient, I saw him at least 20 years ago. So it's not long after I started in the practice that I finished in. And he turned up, and I remember at the time, because it was our first year when we had a foundation dentist, and this was crying out for a bonded amalgam, which we were doing at the time, where you'd glue in your amalgam core, and then you'd make a crown. And I was really quite keen to do that because I hadn't done many. And anyway, so he didn't want it done. His teeth had been like that a long time and hadn't bothered him. And well, it's still like that now. So how long's that? That's 20 years. And it looks like that. I don't think much has changed. It's probably the angle of the x-ray that I took. And he's had no treatment. This is obviously deteriorated. And you say, look, really, this should come out. And he said, well, it's not giving me any pain. So he just said, well, if it gives you any discomfort, then you need to have it out. And you tell them to make the appropriate appointment. But so he's been sitting on, there's no way I was going to attempt to crown that one. These are silver points. Even I stopped putting in silver points about 30 years ago. So it's been there a long time. Right, and so this is a video that I made about looking after your teeth. So this is about prevention. And I've made another one. This is just an indication of what can happen with your teeth if you don't look after them. Well, we'll skip that. And this is one of the things that I was trying to say, is that quite a few of my patients think I'm the best dentist in the world. Uh, and a lot of your patients will think the same. And this isn't me, it's my dad. And yeah, so he gave me some advice that was really useful. He said, when you're at work, remember people in your office or your surgery aren't behaving as they normally are, and you have to give them a bit of leeway. They're pretty anxious, and it's stating the obvious. The other one was you always need dentists. I had actually got into university to do something else, and then realised I could have done dentistry, so I deferred a year, and I never regret doing that. And yeah, you will be the best dentist in the world, but you have to make your own mug. And this is the paper that came out, or the first one that came out around about March time, I think. And in it, it mentioned this. Well, hardly anyone remembers that. I can vaguely remember it because it seemed like a good, reasonable technique to me. And it was, I'm pretty sure it was used, or may still be used, in Australia. And this was the other product. And I'd been trying to get that for some time, but I never managed it. And in it, it says that you have to have appropriate support and training for these new techniques. But also you also need to be paid. So there are lots of details within the document. But sometimes you think this is just getting too much when you have to actually, for me who can't type, to write all of this in the patient record notes, I think is too much. And I have actually got these videos, a link for these videos. And this is how we should be doing stuff. So we should be using modern technology. This is the one NHS dental app available. And you've probably come across it. You clean your teeth at certain times. Well, I ought to amend this. But yeah, so everyone come across the 3 A's, analgesics, antimicrobials, and advice, isn't it? Yeah. And it's interesting is that we will have all written down what we've done when the pandemic started, but we probably won't follow it up. With those patients that came in with a tooth that was infected and you prescribed antibiotics, it'd be interesting to see how many of them actually come back and what treatment is done for them. And then, so this is another holiday snap. So yeah, in March last year, in fact, probably the day I give the talk, I went off to India with my friends, and well, I ended up having a prolonged stay there. But I ended up in a place called Kerala, and then the pandemic struck. We got kicked out of Kerala and then went to Goa. And when I was in Goa, I ran out of my statins. And you can see that no one will have seen the beach this empty at Goa. But anyway, I was in Goa and I went to buy my statins, which cost, I think they cost £1, which is quite expensive. The Flagyl I bought, or I could have bought, and they were 20p. And again, I was surprised. Amoxicillin was £1, but you could buy it over the counter. So you just bought it over the counter, and we're all in a global world. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that it'd be interesting to see if we ever did the follow-up. Oh, and this was the funny video at the time, but I won't play that. It may not be that funny anymore. But I had this, and so this is an interesting letter because I sent this back to my friend March 23rd, where are we now? March 22nd. And no, sorry, February 22nd. And what had happened was we were stuck in Goa, and then we got moved on. And I'd had a message from a friend who works in ENT, and it was a lot worse in the UK than it was in India. Yeah, and obviously we're still dealing with it. So I ended up in Mumbai and stayed here. It was the second time I've been to Mumbai in the trip, and we couldn't afford to stay here. Except with COVID, it ended up being a quarter of the cost, and it was one of the few hotels that was open, and it had 500 people in, but it had less than 20 guests. And eventually, I did get back on a repatriation flight about 3 weeks later. So this is a video about ozone. Now, I don't know how quick it's going to load.
Hi, this is Dr. Feng Hui Chen speaking. Today, I want to talk about use ozone therapy as an alternative to traditional root canal treatment.
Well, you can't. And that's an interesting video because you'd never see a tooth in it. Going back to the antibiotics, who knows? But she never mentions doing anything with a tooth, although you can use ozone for endodontics. And this was another video, and I didn't even download this video because this is someone showing how to do root canal therapy and crowns and deciduous teeth and a general anesthetic. And I just think this is just absolutely appalling. Anyway, so if you go back to this video and I'll explain it a little bit more there. And that's that part. Put this in it takes about 10 minutes, but we're not going to watch that. It was when we were pausing to go through our survey. Right, well, looks like I may have a screen save slightly wrong there. Let's see. So this was a video that, again, I won't play the full thing. Excuse me. It's, but it was about this guy, and it's about doing something different. So you can look it up on YouTube. And yeah, where's my screen save? So what this says is what I said before, but part of the instructions on our from the CDO were about increasing the size of the fissures, and we'll come to that. I'll see a picture of that soon. And this chap who was with the Dental Defence, he used to go around in the 80s saying how you can make the NHS work carrying out preventive dentistry, and it just hasn't really, it just gets worse and worse each year, unfortunately. So he was like working in the grey areas, as I say. It's never really black and white. It's only black and white when you get sued. And I've just put this in because it mentions Tony Smith, and I'm not that Tony Smith. So yeah, so I wouldn't want him getting into trouble for anything that I say. Ian Chappell I've seen a few times, and he's a fantastic lecturer. If you ever get the chance to go and see him, go and see him. He's just excellent. I think you know, there are some people that you would clearly go and see. On Trevor Burke, well, I really like him, and this group, they're really good. Go online to go on their courses, and it was because of them I went on a course and I made this video, and I think hopefully we'll get to why I made it. But it had, showing a patient a video had a real big impact on their oral health. And yeah, these do have real health. Videos are a great way of learning and getting your message across. This is the first real one that got my message across when I was complaining with the corporate at Solma Practice too. And I sent them a message saying that we weren't going to hit our target because this was my PDU, preventive dental unit, and it was just being used as a storeroom. And there were lots of other issues, but yeah, they were, I wouldn't say they were impressed with my YouTube message that I sent them, which is a private message. But yeah, they wanted to do a constructive dismissal. But anyway, those days are gone. And this is what I started to send out recently. And this is something that should save you a lot of grief, is if you use this template you send to your patients, you know, obviously the BP, this patient's not in good shape, but you actually, when you take the BPE, it takes like 15 seconds to, when I was working with SOE, to bring up the template adjacent to the BPE, write it down. The BWE, you know, obviously that's mainly for the teenagers, but you'd send this to them and it shows, this is the video that I made showing oral health and general health related together. And then there's this one here, which now isn't my video. I did make a video on how to check yourself for cancer, but there's a far better one that I've used and have permission for. So this, I'd definitely screenshot this and work out how to use it. It could save you a lot of grief. This is just to prove I was a student. I'm being manhandled there. That was my year. I think a few of them are still working, but a lot have retired. And again, this is just another one. This is like me giving general advice, and it's just saying, look, get insured. I broke my arm. I had a compound fracture, and so I had it operated on twice, and I had 6 weeks off twice. And but my broken finger, my middle finger, that was classic, and I ended up off for 3 months. One of the months was spent recuperating in California with the family. And this is just, again, I think this is just me showing that if anyone's in Cardiff, I'm not sure if you still have this sweatshirt, but this is what I had on the sweatshirt. And this is my other bit is, yeah, I went to Glastonbury a lot, but never as a dentist. And my name's been down for like 15 years. So put your name in quick if you want to be the dentist and guarantee a place to get to Glastonbury. And this one is about reading instructions. So I have used Biodentine, you will have heard of it. And in fact, the dentist less than 2 miles from here just talks on it all around the world, I think. The thing that I found out was when I first used it, it's pretty obvious the way you sort of mix it and what have you. And we were doing that. And I said to my nurse, just have a quick look at the instructions. But yeah, it took 12 minutes to set. Now, 12 minutes is a long time. And so while there are lots of claims for this material, and I think it is very good, a setting time of 12 minutes doesn't really help with your workflow. And this is, yeah, this was one of Kirk's. And yeah, I think I'll probably delete these slides to speed it up a bit because you will have seen this. But this is open learning. I heard this this term, and it is that when I learned, well, we'll come on to that, but it was through books and lectures in a lecture hall. Well, clearly now you're looking at this at home on a screen or somewhere, and also you access information. You can do it via your phone. So as I said before, all the references are here. I think I said it incorrectly before. I think Kirk's paper's actually here. Yeah, and then there's his papers there. So, and that's where you would look to do his study, not to do his study, but to go through his notes purely on MID. Yeah, and I made a video on water fluoridation. Hopefully it's in the news at the moment, but it explains the video. I put it in this section in my app, and why we need to fluoridate the water, because it helps the people who are most vulnerable, you know, children in disadvantaged areas. And yeah, so this was to remind me, I first started work in a practice, and I left finally after a few months because I had to do a GA session, which was, I'd like to say was interesting, but it was extremely traumatic. In fact, I think it's on my video about fluoridation. But the other part was I really did not like work. It was a real slog for me. And within 2 months, they brought out something about increasing your pension. And that was the first thing I did. Was after 2 months, I increased my contribution so I could retire early. And that's worked really well. So after a few months, I came to here, which is in Bristol, and that's where I worked before. And I worked here for 2 years. Again, there was no principal there. There was no principal in the other one. It was a satellite practice. And I would say for the first 2.5, 3 years of my practice in life, I didn't do foundation dentist course or anything like that. And the only experience I had was, oh yeah, I had to, you taught yourself how to do an apicectomy. I remember booking in an apicectomy, and I'd seen one like 4 deep a few years ago, so I had to buy a book. But lots of places are bringing out videos on them now. But yeah, I had a little read of a book and then did the apicectomy, and I didn't get into trouble for it. It went very well, actually, thank you. But I did have trouble with the practice, and I ended up having a full hearing with the GGC up in London, about a year out of dental school, or 2 years out. And also we had, a problem with someone, and it wasn't my fault, and that wasn't great. And yeah, and these are my notes. So I think this one is the same thing, saying I actually did carry on doing apicectomies. I think this must have been the last one. And yeah, I know his tooth's still there. Well, I know his tooth's still there because bizarrely I used to play football with him, and yeah, he's a fair bit younger than me. But that is the crown that I know I did that crown, although I haven't got the notes. Well, I must have the notes somewhere. So that's the crown. And yeah, so it's literally only half a tooth there. So I did the apicectomy. I think it sounds better in the card than it was. I don't think there's a retrograde amalgam filling in there, but the tooth is still there. He wanted a gold tooth. It's not even a good gold tooth. But he eventually, and I never do this, so this is the only person I've done it for, is he wanted veneers on his lower teeth. And the only good thing was class 3. And as you can see, these things, you can just see the overlay. So these pictures, I think, are some of my best pictures. And he wanted me to replace the veneer because it had chipped. And of course, you can't see it, but what you can see is the margins of the veneers. And I always placed them super gingival anyway. Anyway, he wanted me to redo them, and I refused. So I think hopefully he's not having them redone. Anyway, so we used to have cards like this. So I think I'm going to show some pictures of my notes. But really, we write too much. And we should have a sort of a standard thing. We don't have to write everything down, especially if you can't type like me. And we should have like a T&C. So when I upload my Apple stuff, it always says, do you agree? We ought to have something similar for our patients that, I'm sure a lawyer could write something. And yeah, so these were my notes back in the day. So I think I've got some a little bit earlier than this. I'm trying to keep it to a minimum. I thought I used to write LA given, but I didn't, but I presume I did. I think I would have said LA not given. I did do Glasionomer sealants back then though, and that's a long time ago. And there was something else. No, not on that one. Oh yes, I used acid etch. So when was that? That's 87. And yeah, they lasted a fortnight, and so I redid it when I fitted the crown in my busy quarter of an hour. Oh, and I did send, even back then, the hygienist had a quarter of an hour to see to the patients, and her notes were as good as mine. She did a scale and polish on that one. And if you look around, yeah, scale and polish there, scale and polish there. You wouldn't want to write any more down because you'd end up with no card at all. You have to keep it minimal because the folder would fall apart. Yeah, and this was it, is that I think you do have to look after yourself. So I wanted to put this in, is that you're no good to anyone unless you're well. And we all know that you don't perform well if you're stressed. This is just wear eye protection. I think this is about 18 months in. Anyway, I shouldn't have done what I did. I should have been wearing safety glasses. I didn't break my arm playing with this team, but we had a really good football team. I always say the one thing I was good at was football. I hope I wasn't that bad a dentist, but I was definitely better footballer than I was a dentist. And yeah, but we used to train twice a week, and I used to find it great for stress. And I used to cycle home from work, basically because my car didn't work very well. My Italian motorbike didn't work, and so I'd end up cycling in Bristol. And this is what I do now. So these 3 guys are people I was at uni with, or rather shared a house with. and that's my brother. So we've done lots of bike rides. So that's from Chester to Bristol, I think. And I think I've mentioned before about doing Future Learn, but this is peer review. I can't recommend this highly enough. If you haven't got a group, I'll get a group together. Hopefully when lockdown finishes, you can do what we used to do. We used to make our own little presentations, but more often than not, we'd get an expert, and I mean some really good experts, some who talk about dentistry in a relaxed manner, and you do need to be able to talk about things that have happened to you in a nice relaxed manner in a group. You can certainly make these things work for you. Yeah, and I really like these TED Talks, and this is a really good talk which says the same thing. Whilst we are all interconnected, there's nothing quite as useful as your friends. And I said I listen to podcasts. This is great. I think he says the meaning of life that he went looking for, and he says it after record 6, I think. So I'd listen to that. And I moved on after a couple of years, and I ended up with someone who ended up being a mentor, I would say. And I met this lady in the States. She's head of the Pankey Institute, I think, but the chap I worked with was head of Pankey, which is occlusion, and their thing was never to take out a tooth. MID is really hanging on to as much tooth as possible. I suppose prevention is not doing, I wouldn't say not doing anything, but certainly avoiding any treatment. And what I did find is I wasn't particularly busy there, but the chap that was there, he's the best technician or best clinician I've ever seen. And he had his own lab in Bristol. And so I used to go to the lab, and I wasn't that confident about my work until I saw what everyone else was doing. And the reality is what you sometimes hear and see on a screen is a lot different to what actually occurs. And this lab, that's the dental school back there. This lab did a lot of work for the dental school, and a lot of it wasn't great. And I'm not talking about the students. Anyway, I didn't make any money here, and so I had to move. But one of my colleagues, he moved to Vancouver, and I moved to what was called the Amalgam Factory. So this was very much NHS. A few years ago, he used to work 2 days a week in Harley Street, or whatever. He'd fly over, do 2 days work once a month, and clearly was at a different charging rate than myself. One thing the chap said was, you need to reconsider why you do things. And I remember seeing him saying the patient had a swelling and I ought to take the tooth out. And he said, well, if it's bothering them, why? And it's interesting, isn't it? If someone's got a sinus, and I was never quite sure what this was, but I referred it to the dental hospital, and they said, well, you better take, I can't remember which tooth they said to take out. I think it might have been molar. But in the end, the patient was fine. It wasn't painful. And so we didn't do anything. And the teeth are still there 12 years later. Not the best root filling in the world, but it's still there. Yeah, and so this is I think I told you I had a Dürr camera, and some of the data didn't transfer over that well. The picture was never great, but it was never that bad. And this is more recently. And so now and again, this would flare up and then burst. And it's been like that for 25 years. Yeah, I think that's the same. And yes, so these are just, I'm not actually sure if it's the same patient, but this tended to happen quite a lot, where someone would fracture off the crown. And so what I would do, this is the one, when they come with the crown in the hand, is you do a root filling. I think it's this one. Anyway, that's what I do. I do a root filling and put a post in. I generally use metal posts. I played with white posts for a while, but metal posts. And that's sort of minimal invasive dentistry. And about that time, this started kicking off. And so this is the original video. So you can look that up. But I always remember treating a hepatitis.
There is now a danger.
I had a patient who I did some surgery on prior to making some bridges. But in the end, I didn't make the bridges because he told me he'd had hepatitis the whole time I was treating him. Yeah. That was an interesting conversation. Some more holiday pictures. This is Portugal. I do a lot of cycling in Portugal when I can. So we play tennis as well. These are my tennis friends actually, but we also play golf. And as you know, golf's quite a dangerous game. And this, the guy nearly died, I think. It was one of the most horrific things I've seen on a golf course, but he got hit by the golf ball. It was just nuts. And the reason I'm showing this is because he's a dentist. The guy that hit the ball was a dentist. And well, actually, he's an oral surgeon. And he went back to the hospital. We were that night on the plane. And the following day, saw his mate, who was the oral surgeon. But he had a Maryland done, or Acides bridge, and I've always thought these were excellent. But I remember this is that, and it would have been around about 1987 when I just bought into a practice. I was a partner in the practice. I think they had been there less than a year, and this bridge had an extra wing on it, and I'd heard that people thought they'd have more success with one wing. So originally they had two wings, and on the American pictures you still see two wings, but it kept falling off. And I hadn't made the bridge, and this young girl, she was crying her eyes out. And then I said, when I'm going to cut the end off and see if it works a bit better. She was not a happy bunny, and I was a bit worried. Anyway, it's been there ever since. Now it's not, it's not the best in the world, but it's been there. So that, it's been there since 1986. Oh, gone the wrong way. Yeah, as has the root. I never made the bridge. It never occurred to me that the root hadn't been taken out. Anyway, I give it the choice. Anyway, we decided to leave it. It would have been rather difficult. And yeah, at the same time, so I also did a few of these where and again, you have to remember this was over 25 years ago, and you weren't meant to do this. And I said to the patient, well, you can't have a bridge because the other tooth in theory will get loose, and maybe we should have a denture. And I wouldn't, whilst these have got fillings in, very small fillings in with staining, I wouldn't want to do a 3-unit bridge on that. And I did see pictures of how these swing out. I've only ever seen one picture of it swung out. And of course now, if you were worried, you'd make a retainer. And this is even worse, is that I had a very anxious patient, but I've done lots of these. And so invariably the immediate. So yeah, so like a lot of people you'd see from this time, instead of having orthodontic work to make the teeth look better, the dentist would have done lots of crowns. And if the teeth were pointing the wrong direction, well, maybe make post crowns. And well, as you can see, they break. And this was, I think this is from the root. So we had to say, no, that enough is enough. And yeah, so that was, I took the tooth out, and this was a few, about a couple of weeks later, this had all healed up. And she was, extremely pleased. And this is the same, is that the patient with not great oral hygiene smoked like 60 a day, still does. And she'd lost the tooth through perio. And this is over 20 years ago. And I said, well, you're going to lose all the teeth very soon. And so invariably you find if you take out one tooth for a lower incisor, within a couple of years, they probably lost all the lower incisors. So we decided just to glue it in, and I cut the root off, did nothing else, and glued it in. And lo and behold, it stayed. Then she lost the other tooth. I was going to make her a denture then, and we glued it in, but she lost it. It fell out. The other one's never fallen out. Anyway, it fell out and it lost it. And so, but she wanted the bridge. So I made a single retained tooth, and it's still there. It doesn't look very nice. And I'm sure it's only lasted because she's up against a denture. But these bridges work very well. So this is one that I didn't do. And it had been there for like 20 years. And it's done at the dental hospital. And yeah, again, when you take the x-ray, it's a bit surprising in that it was done at a dental hospital. And yeah, the root fillings, the back root's all right. Front's a little bit, difficult. And also, a patient I referred, I don't do implants, and I referred, she had the implant here. But yeah, and this is a Maryland she had done at that time for the canine off the 4. Well, I did that at the same time. They've both been there the same length of time. And this is just a picture to throw into, oh yeah, the big mistake. Yeah, I went traveling in '89. I was trying to look rough, so I did. I was quite good at that. So because we stayed in some dodgy places, so I went traveling for 3 months, but I was a practice owner, so I don't regret the traveling. I just shouldn't have been a practice owner. I just ring my brother every fortnight to ask if I'd gone bust. And this is, I did a desktop publishing course many years ago when I started my practice in '95, and handed out leaflets. And this is just to remind you that a lot of the stuff that you see is just stuff that I've Googled. I really know a bit, but not that much. But this, I'd have a look at this. We ought to liaise with one another a lot better than we are. Half the reason dentistry is a mess is that we don't really have a good unified voice. So this is another video that I made when I learned how to do animations.
You're born with a beautiful smile.
But again, I wouldn't play that now. And this is how you enjoy your work. I did the course as a trainer, and this is where you need to be. You need to be pushing your skills. And it's difficult at the moment, but one thing, going back to Drucker, is you always should work on your strengths. And you should also try and force yourself. When you get older, it's less and less likely to happen, but you should always try and get into this area of flow. And there's nothing better when you're in flow. So this is my sort of hobby now, is trying to make an app. And this was one of my first sort of attempts at it, to outline it. It was called a minimal viable product. But anyway, it's now a viable product. You can download it and you can personalize it yourself. So this is from the Apple Store. It's on Google Play. But you go to, I haven't written it down here, careforteeth.co.uk. It says if you squeeze me, I think it tells you where to go to register. And this is, I just put this in because this guy who runs this, Drew, he's excellent. And he has lots of good speakers on there. I'm pretty sure he's got a section for younger dentists, but there are lots of other places that you can look for help and advice. Yeah, and this chap, as I say, I mentored. He's ended up doing a lot of ortho and restorative work, and he doesn't wear loops. That's the thing. So, and he is excellent. He's on a par with the guy that mentored me back in '85, '86. He's just gifted. And yeah, some people are brilliant, but he doesn't put his work on Instagram so much now because he's just too busy. But the other disappointing thing is he says he sees people who come in wanting this kind of cosmetic work referred from dentists, and they've just got decay everywhere. Anyway, I think I'm going to have to cut this out in my talk because I'm running out of time. But I did a root filling years ago. I did lots of root fillings, but I always remember this one because they had it like a massive area on it. And obviously I haven't got the x-ray, but this is a digital x-ray of the root filling that I did back then. And yeah, I don't think I did this one, but the root filling method was called Lightspeed. And I think that's probably a thermofill that I did back then. And it healed up fine. Yeah, and I think the patient had pain. And you can imagine, she came in a lot of pain. It's a big filling here. Looks like a glass ionomer back in the day. But I ended up taking out that tooth. And then this one drifted forward. Yeah, and then the next thing that happened was, yeah, the back fell off the other tooth, and I put in a poor glass ionomer. And oh no, maybe it lost a bit more. Anyway, it's certainly not great, but she was having no problems with this particular tooth. And so I crowned it, and then she started to get problems. Yeah, so this looks like an area on the tooth after I'd put a crown on it, and decided not to go looking for that root. But I did do a root filling, and I didn't think it worked because it was such a big area, except I'd done it before 25 years earlier, and sure enough, it healed up. And I'm not the best at root fillings, but they're so much easier than it used to be. It's just sad that we're not really able to do them. Yeah, we should be doing more. Oh, and the interesting part was I learned more about this. Around that time, we were talking about using hypochlorite, and there were lots of cases of people getting problems with hypochlorite. And anyway, in the pub, I met a guy who was doing a PhD in capillary action physics, and we were talking about motion of fluids in narrow spaces, which obviously a root canal is. And yeah, I'm not convinced about. Certainly using hypochlorite in the canals is excellent, but we don't need that much. And so my thing was I use hypochlorite a lot. Back in the day, I used to use Sterilux to clean them out. You meant to use ozone, but I could never find a YouTube video showing me how to use ozone. But my main thing now is I went from doing them in 2 stages to doing them in 1. And as long as, if I found the tooth was bleeding, you would always be a bit apprehensive if you weren't sure about if you weren't in a canal or not. Certainly, I'd try and avoid the bleeding before you go wild with the hypochlorite. And at the end, just dry them. And if you can, and they were the main things, I think, for root fillings. It's not that difficult. I did refer one patient to the specialist endodontist, and this is what came back. Now I'd asked them to do the 6, and of course it came back then. Well, it's over root filled now, and I was just a nervous wreck. I mean, what can you do with this? And I was never quite sure what was going on here, but I did know there wasn't any tooth left. But fortunately, I made a crown just to sit on top, and that stayed. This tooth, I didn't ask to be treated, but he said the root filling wasn't very good, so he put one in. Yeah, and the patient had pain with the other one. And after I'd root filled this one, she was still getting discomfort. But this is obviously broken, and as you can see here, she's now got no teeth at all. She's got 1 implant. And what happened was that I'd filled 2 canals on this tooth, but actually there were 3. So it's just that I referred to a guy that used to work for me, and he got a CBT scanner and found it had 3 roots. So decided to, there wasn't much of the tooth left. So the safest thing was to take it out and do a cantilever bridge off an implant. And yeah, I'm not sure if this will play. No, this is interesting because this is AI. If we've got all these digital x-rays in the future, what will happen is if you put, it will record from the previous bite wings, it'll be able to tell you when you need to do treatment or not. Well, in my view. And this is just a minimal case. A guy came in, he'd fallen off his bike. Well, the car crashed into him and he was in a bit of pain and I couldn't see what it was. And then I could. Yeah, and so, do you have to be interested in what you do? And I'd been to a talk by someone called Kanka. I think he was in charge of Optident back in the day, or their products. And so I just sealed the tooth. And it's just still there. It looks a lot better than that. But he did lose a bit out the back, and I just put some glass ionomer in there. So that I know he's still got the tooth, so that was back then. Yeah, and that's what it looks like on the x-ray. It doesn't look like it's got an area, he's got no pain, it's not even that wildly discolored. I just cemented it back in. And yeah, so these last a long time, these old fillings, the amalgam fillings, they've lasted really well. Back in the day, we were told to polish them and they'd last longer, and then you since found out they didn't. But this is the best thing. This is nothing at all. By far the best thing. And so the reason I've included this is, as you see, in 95, you could buy an encyclopedia. But now we've got this, which is free, although they've asked it for some more money recently. And it's regularly updated. And 70% of GPs, never mind dentists, get their information. The first go-to place is Wikipedia. As I did for when I was trying to find out, because the whole technique, I'm pretty sure, is developed by someone who did it incorrectly to start with. And yeah, and Americans don't believe in Dahl apparently, but that's what it basically probably works on to a large extent, and sealing in decay. But it wasn't. It wasn't done found at dental school. It was decided retrospectively, a little bit like Acides bridges. So I've made lots of videos all about prevention, and they're all on my YouTube channel. So it'd be great if you would subscribe. The more subscribers, the more likely the public will use it. And here there are instructions for how to set up it all on your phone. So anyone can download it, but you can customize it. And so these are just some videos that I've made, and this was for oral cancer. So I've just recently, GIFs used to take me like 2 hours, but now they take 10 minutes. And so this is another one. But actually what it's saying is, don't just check your mouth for cancer. Use that mouth check, or the timing of the mouth check, just to check everywhere else. And yeah, so the site that you go to register is this one, and it's full of advice on how you can make prevention work for you, and also market stuff. So you can market things that you do. So this is the site. You press here, and then you fill in the details, and I'll be able to authorize it. And yeah, that's the same or slightly different layout for the email that you should send to your patients. And these were cards that before we weren't allowed to do. These work very well. I've used business cards in the past, but what you do is it's better if you send it on a computer, and I'm trying to work that out now. But if you fill in the BWE and then you just scribble out the cards, there was a tooth map on the app, and then you just circle which videos they should watch. So there's just simple links to different videos. That's manual brushing, interdental brushing, pocket brushing, I think, motivation, and one other. There were definitely 5 there. Yeah. And yeah, so so I did have hygiene therapy and dental therapy, which are basically treatments, but I changed it after COVID to dental emergencies, and also I made them all animations. Prior to that, they weren't animations. And yeah, so I put that bit in there at the front. And this is actually a 20-minute video of me talking, which you wouldn't want to do now. So this is where we'd have the break.